Denver.
Yeah,
She's got one person after another calling her. What can I do? What can I do?
that's fantastic.
Isn't that great? It's in
Yeah.
America.
Okay, we've
Everybody's
got
out there to help.
people here. Now I just need to turn this guy on.
And no matter how old you are, there's always something you can do. If you're still alive. If you're not 6 feet under.
There they are.
Living proof of that.
Oh.
Yeah, I belong to the garden club, but that doesn't mean I have a garden.
Now, let me check
You
the
saw my house,
sound.
you wouldn't say that.
Liz, can you say something so I can see if we can hear you?
Yes, hello.
Hey, that's coming from the right place. That's perfect.
Okay, good.
All right.
I didn't even have to come in that way. I came now.
I'm still sideways.
Yeah, see you sideways.
Yeah, that's me.
Thea is a unique personality, and she reinforces that by turning up in our meeting sideways. All
I've
right.
been doing a lot of sideways things.
Well, I think that's that just shows that you're innovative.
There you go. That's a nice way to look at it, Patty.
Nothing better than
This salad that I make that I really like, it's got tomatoes and garlic and avocado.
Oh, great.
And there's a half an avocado, tomatoes,
Yeah.
and onions,
Yeah,
and the red onions.
yeah.
And then basil,
Mhm.
and then rice vinegar,
Yeah.
and olive oil, and that's it.
Yeah, I would throw
And it-
throw feta cheese in there.
You could, well, that's the thing, you already
Yeah.
say these salads are good.
Every time I
You
have,
got it.
every time I've got red onions, I keep that feta cheese around because it's cheap. So it's one we're allowed to
Yeah.
eat. And I really enjoy,
Well, and I take
That
things
with-
from the salad bar and.
Yeah. right, yeah,
It's
that's great.
illegal, but I go to Moody's
Yeah,
and I get their dinner salad, the small one,
yeah,
and I put all this junk in it.
yeah.
And
And then you
it
can
is
take home
so
what you
good.
don't eat. Right, there's nothing wrong with taking home what you don't eat,
But you
right?
gotta, well, I was finding that things were, I go out once a meal,
Yeah,
a big meal, and that's it at noon time, or whenever I get away.
right.
And I even take shrimp now, but I gotta watch that, because it is illegal to do that.
Take,
Take it,
if it's your food and you are just taking home your leftovers.
yeah, but it's illegal.
okay. I didn't. how
Hey,
come they-
Patty, Patty,
Yeah,
I had a question about the feta cheese because some of it is made with, I think, cow's milk. Are you talking about only the feta cheese that's made with goat's milk?
Yes.
yeah,
absolutely.
typical feta cheese is supposed to be made with sheep's milk.
Really? I thought it
Yeah.
was goat's milk.
No, it's sheep, I believe.
Yeah, sheep or goat. I mean, they
I'm
do
not
both.
absolutely sure.
Check it.
Oh, let's Google that. Whoops. Crazy failing with the network error.
And I found.
That's working.
We didn't count it, but he had a really good time. That was bad about that, though. That big thing has to be on my record there. Never get above that.
So,
Okay, it
So,
says it's a
Patty-
Greek grind white cheese made from sheep's milk
Really?
or a mixture of sheep and goat's milk.
Wow.
oh, good.
So.
So,
You're both right.
Well, I'm
Well,
learning every day, that's.
But I suspect you have to be careful about where you get it and check,
Yeah.
you know, whether they've cheated.
Right.
So Patty,
And I
Yes,
found
not
this.
there today and people are exchanging recipes. Do we get to be a part of that or that's
I will, Rosalie, I will try to take pictures of any recipes people brought. And then I'll stick them up on the on our group email.
You're the best. Thank you.
Well, you may have to remind me. If they don't return in a few days, then ask me for them, okay?
Okay, thank you.
The drive slide set I gave you last time,
Yeah, I can.
and just put it down in the bottom tray here somewhere.
Sure. Yeah, let me just go find it. That's not gonna show up there.
It was getting quiet. I guess it's time to start.
Yeah.
Three.
Still early,
Yeah.
a little bit.
Let's see where I put it. Maybe here. Here it is, booth by protocol.
Oh, don't start.
So I'll just, it's here. Yep. We want to call it up? We can. Just
Okay.
let me know. No, you're not in the picture here. There we go.
Hi, everybody.
No,
Hello. Welcome. Happy holidays. We had winter already, yeah, then it rained. Is it cold now?
It's beginning to snow a little and be windy.
So this particular session is our last one for 2023. And as many of you have noticed over the last couple of months of our monthly seminars, is that there's a lot of new information that I'm presenting to you, and I think that reflects that I continue to be reassessing almost continuously what we're doing and where we're going and how we're going to try to get there. And I think that is a process that will continue until we've figured out Alzheimer's disease. And it's pretty ambitious to even be thinking of doing that. But if we go by how my own evolution has happened in the last 3 or 4 years of working with you guys, I've learned enough that if I can keep learning at that pace, a solution is really right around the corner. It really has been a very, very steep learning curve through this whole time. And Bredesen opened the door by talking about this as some of his articles. He talked about calling this personalized medicine, where he was saying that we should have individualized the solution for each one of us. And even though there are, by definitions, Alzheimer's disease or cognitive impairment or dementia, that there are case definitions on what that means. I think when we talk about these terms, I think we all can think of situations where this person's Alzheimer's disease behaves differently than somebody else's Alzheimer's disease, or this person's dementia behaves a lot differently than somebody else's dementia. And so even though the core definitions of Alzheimer's disease usually have something in it about our memory, and usually we have some sort of cliche that we hold on to long-term memory more than easier than we hold on to short-term memory. And that a lot of the people with Alzheimer's disease have more of a problem with short-term memory. We also regularly hear that executive function has something to do with what Alzheimer's disease is or isn't. And executive function is broadly defined as my ability to take care of myself. My ability to
Pushing yourself away, that's fine. Sure. Can I bring you up here?
that might be Jim.
Sorry.
It's okay, Jim. Hi. There we go. So that we end up, executive function can be my ability to follow through. In our current world, we all know that some of us are way better than others at multitasking, and that we all don't necessarily consider that a disease, that we can't multitask. It's that we are supposed to only be doing and paying attention to the thing that's most important at the moment and living in the moment. So you can even argue about the terms. But with Bredeson's whole approach, he opened my eyes, and I think nearly all of us, to the concept that these cognitive impairment issues didn't start yesterday, that they are multifactorial, that they smolder for 10 or 20 or 30 years before they produce something that's clinically significant. And my task, as I've seen it over the last few years, is to try to build some boundaries around that, to try to build a methodology, to try to build a sequence, and have gotten more and more involved with each other over the last few years. It's clear that we all look at this problem quite a bit differently through our own lens. Patty and I were just talking before the meeting today that well, can't we just use what my impression of myself is and how that has gone over the course of my involvement in this program, or since the last meeting, or this year, or whatever. And certainly I've made it a priority that the thing that we want to do is to measure success or failure on whether or not it improved or didn't the things that are most important to each individual in the group. And so that is, if I remember reading at one time a critique of diabetes treatment and said, if my numbers get better, but I don't feel any better, what's the point? Yeah. So some of it is our hope that by participating in this, we will know when we are getting better. But the other part of it that that I've struggled with over the last couple of years is that, in spite of following the core of the Bredesen program quite closely, some individuals in our group have developed more cognitive impairment rather than less, and that is been troublesome from day one for me, because if the program is really worth its salt, you should have an answer for everybody. You should have, even though you can't make everybody 30 years old again, or their brain as good as they were 20 or 30 years ago, you should be able to impact everybody's issues to some degree. And we've had a couple people in our group who have done a yeoman's job of trying to follow every bit of advice, and they still see their spouse, their life partner, not improving or getting worse. And that is troubling to me and says that we're not there yet, that we haven't figured out some critical ingredients. So you've got that on the one hand, and then you've got the other more mildly symptomatic individuals who say, I'm definitely not as foggy mentally as I was before I started this program, or I have made some measurable progress with the kind of crude objective measurements like we have on Montreal Cognitive Assessments or any other remember 3 words, 5 words, whatever we want to talk about. So a number of my my focus in the last several months has been how do we revisit the core features of what we're doing here. I don't think the Bredesen tenets have changed. You know, it is still healthy eating, exercise, brain games, improved sleep. All of those things are overnight fasting. Those are the things that he's not wavered on or said, well, that's not as important as it used to be. You know, if anything, he's more emphatic in the last year or two than he was 3 or 4 years ago about saying the big 3 are healthy eating, exercise, and overnight fasting. So what I'm looking for, though, is in the movie that we all saw now almost 2 months ago, it was that the that he did say in the of that what we were dealing with would be best if we could take this program and add it to a pill of some kind or a medication of some kind that would get us there faster. I think that's kind of the American way, but I think I've also been quite focused on the fact that when we have talks about supplements, which supplement or which group of supplements, what is a hierarchy of supplements, which ones are better or not. And I think the people that talk about these are still saying that there are some very powerful chemicals for the brain, like vitamin D, like vitamin B12, like making sure the thyroid is okay, and these kinds of solutions, trying to make sure that we are still not having ongoing inflammation. And I think that has been influencing my thinking in the last couple of months the most, is how do we know whether there is ongoing inflammation or not? And that has led to some of these tests that a few of you have had just in the last month or so, called a Cytokine panel 13. That this is a group of measurable inflammatory markers that are trying to measure inflammation just like the inflammatory markers that we started learning about a few years ago, the highly sensitive CRP and the homocysteine level, were two markers of inflammation that Bredesen wrote about early and that we started measuring with all of our initial labs, and then doing that more often. I had to all last January get a homocysteine level and a highly sensitive CRP before we started this calendar year, to try to see if we could use that as a benchmark of where we were at. I was looking for something tighter than those two markers, because there were a fair number of individuals who were having worse cognitive impairment and whose highly sensitive CRP and homocysteine level were in the normal range. They had, and so then we threw a monkey wrench into all of that by me finding some articles that said that you have to have a functioning amount of brain cells to produce the inflammatory markers. And if your brain is quite atrophied, then you may not produce those markers. So then, does that mean that all the damage has been done? Then why is somebody continuing to get worse? Now, if they are still losing ground, it suggests that there is an ongoing process and there's an ongoing amount of inflammation. And how do we measure that? And that is where, in the last several months, learning more about the more recently defined cell biology and cell biochemistry markers led to saying that there are markers of inflammation. But then it even got even more complicated, that these markers of inflammation change depending upon what's going on in the neighborhood. So that if you're patrolling cells, your immune system identifies that there is some inflammation, it might wall that off. It might isolate that from the rest of the brain and say, jettison that, throw that overboard, ignore that particular section so it doesn't take down the whole ship. Let's just get rid of that little brush fire. Let's get rid of that, not unlike what would you do if you had an ember or something from your fireplace that interfered and got on your rug, and your little throw rug, and you thought that that might cause a problem. What do? You get that outside. You're not going to let it destroy your whole house. And our immune system is smart enough also to be able to isolate anything that might cause more damage and jettison it, throw it overboard, get rid of it. And so our immune system and some of these markers of inflammation also have the ability to be either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. Sounds like a contradiction. Sounds like it shouldn't be possible. But again, I can use what I am doing to either turn the switch on this cell into being pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, depending upon what is best to solve the particular problem that I'm faced with at that time. So there is an awful lot of gray rather than black and white when you are trying to analyze these results. So where are we? We started with an inventory of measuring what you all noticed that you didn't like about your memory. And you got asked a bunch of questions. Are you having trouble retrieving words? Are you having trouble recognizing faces that you should know at the post office? Are there things that are harder to retrieve than they used to be for you? Are these senior moments, or are these a sign of something that is more sinister than that? We also did some measurements, having people copy cubes, make change, do different things in some of our testing to try to see if there were some objective measurements, and then we would periodically check those again. But I think you'd all agree with me that those are relatively crude measurements, that they are not going to pick up subtle changes that I might have noticed with myself. Are they going to really measure brain fog or lack of brain fog as clearly as I would like? And let's face it, even if it's a 30-question screening test, it's a pretty crude instrument. So what we were looking for were ways to say something more sophisticated than that. And I think we've found over the course of the last few years that our individual progress with those hated Brain HQ games were more sophisticated than what I would be able to find on a 30-point MOCA. That my ability to improve the speed and the complexity of how my brain is working got better with practice. And as many of the teachers in the group could comment on, is that teaching to the test, or is that really that my brain is getting sharper? I hope that it's that we're using our muscle, and by using it, we are getting sharper. We have, in addition to those screening tests and doing some labs, the things that have distinguished this group and this effort have been a few different tests. One of them, a volumetric MRI. Another one, a series of labs from a group called Vibrant, where we did something called a neural zoomer plus. And now our third innovation, as I would call it, would be the Cytokine panel 13. These three particular measures have very different roles in our group. And let me talk about the volumetric MRI first. Bredesen, when he would talk about the volumetric MRI, would really just focus on the hippocampus, and really that being the part of the brain that has been identified with learning and short and long-term memory, among other things. And that was kind of the ground zero for memory stuff. But since we had on our volumetric MRI, we had about 100 other measurements what do those other 100 parts of our brain do? They're clearly, many of them are equally important for me being able to complete a sentence or a thought or walk across the room. So how are we going to look at these? And many of you have sat with me and we have gone over your particular volumetric MRI and pointed out highlights and lowlights, things that were not as robust as we wanted them to be. But even though we had made a big leap to go from just looking at the hippocampus to looking at 100 different parts of the brain, we hadn't really bundled those 100 parts into all of the different combinations that you could think of. And since there are some parts of our brain that are workarounds that we all are familiar with when I'm trying to make a list or remember my list or do anything that I do to try to remember a situation or how I'm going to respond to a situation, we draw on lots of pieces of information. And so it's pretty clear to me now that wasn't clear to me a couple years ago that the combination of things matter. Like some of you may remember the word cingulate or the cingulate gyrus as one part of our brain. You might remember the part of the brain called the amygdala. You might remember a part of the brain called the frontal lobe that was also a source. All these three parts that I've mentioned, the cingulate, the amygdala, and the frontal lobe of our brain, have an awful lot to do with emotion. So what if I'm low in one and high in the other two? And they all impact emotion. What's the end result for me? Does that mean I have an emotional deficit? Or is it not apparent because one part of the brain is covering for the other part of the brain that lost something? And what I've started to understand is that I probably have to have limitations in all of those three places to have an emotional memory be completely out of whack. That as long as something is covering for the other part, so my goal to be better at looking at these volumetric MRIs is to be able to understand what parts of the brain cover for other parts of the brain. And that is true with language retrieval as well. There isn't just one part of the brain that allows me to retrieve that word that I want. And one of the new members of our group the other day was able to describe to me that she absolutely knew the word that she wanted to say. She could write it down, but she couldn't get her mouth to form the word that she wanted to say. So the particular task that it takes to retrieve a word and be able to say it is not that simple, that there are a number of steps along the way to do it. And some of them have real world consequences for people like us. So when we are dealing with this volumetric MRI, it seems more important to me to be able to get better at understanding how these things are layered together. We all find that when we have memory issues, we have workarounds. whether it's tying a string around your finger, or whether it is making a list, or whether it is putting it on your phone, or whether I bring the screw or the nut or the whatever with me to the store, so that I will not forget exactly what I'm trying to get. So we all have different workarounds that we do depending upon what we are trying to accomplish. And if you're trying to remember names, some people run through an alphabet, some people try to remember where they saw somebody last. There are different workarounds that we all use, and it's probably pulling in other parts of our brain that have stored it. It was quite apparent to me a long time ago that I can remember something better if I cross-reference that person's name in a lot of different files. If I have their name, if I have what group they were a part of that I was also a part of, if I remember what town they were from, if we have some other piece of information in common, and if I file that person's name and face in 3 or 4 or 5 different files, there's a better chance I'm going to remember that person than if I just don't go through that exercise of filing them in several different storage bins. So there's an awful lot more with the MRIs and the volumetric MRIs that we can be doing. And my wish is in the next few years to be able to layer more of these things together so that we can try to say that the impact of this atrophy is added to by atrophy in a companion area, or it is minimized by another part of my brain doing a good job of covering for that one area that I have some weakness in. And we really don't, like I've said to many of you, these MRIs are one point on a curve. They represent one point in time. And you don't know whether the size of that part of the brain that we're talking about, whether it has changed over the last 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years. We don't have a context for that. And so we would love to have some frame of reference, but we just have that one point on the curve. And as I've talked to many of you over the course of the last few years, it's clear that a lot of things could have impacted that. Was there a closed head injury, a concussion that impacted that part of the brain, and that concussion happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Was it even a birth injury? We don't really know. Was it that severe case of Lyme disease or pneumonia that I had a bunch of years ago? Was that something that started and caused a problem for me? So you have these MRI results that we want answers. and a lot of times I'm finding that I'm coming up with more questions than I am answers, as we look at some of these things deeper and deeper.
One comment, the Brain HQ, those of us who are doing it, we do have very good statistics.
You do.
And I think the way they've set them up, we can correlate that with areas of the brain as well. So that might be something that even if somebody isn't doing Brain HQ regularly, it might be worth setting them up to be able to do at least an assessment on some of the different areas.
Sure. One of the things that makes Brain HQ quite special is they have 25 different areas or domains
Right.
of testing, something to do with, some to do with spatial recognition, some to do with processing speed, some to do with retrieval. And so we all find that depending upon whether I like to keep going back to ones that I'm already really good at, or whether I am someone who wants to try to work on the ones that I'm having trouble with. You know, we all have our moments when we flip-flop between which ones we're going to be working on. But I think that probably is a way to try to refine the task of trying to say, I'm having trouble with recognizing
People, for example.
people.
Yeah, because they have lots of stuff.
Because
on
they have
that.
lots of stuff on that.
Yeah.
Now, my guide that I put together was labor intensive, but it still was a finite effort that was done over the course of several weeks or months, but it wasn't done over the course of several years. And now when I go back to it and Google some of those parts of the brain, there have been other research reports that have been done in the last year or two since the last time I visited that part of the topic. So these things are not definitive, like there is just one knowledge base about how this particular part of the brain, what it does. And we have an array of different technologies that have only become widely available in the last decade or two. You might have heard of the term functional MRI. I've thrown around something called volumetric MRIs, but there is also something called a functional MRI. This is where I can ask you to solve a problem or read a paragraph while I'm wheeling you into the MRI machine. So I can then see, and I can give you something through an IV that will light up which part of the brain is working when I ask you to add up that group of numbers. So if I had an MRI machine that we could subject you to a series, so for instance, if we had us do all of these 25 Brain HQ domains one at a time and did a functional MRI each time, you could theoretically say, when I am doing this Brain HQ exercise, these parts of my brain light up, and another part of my brain lights up. So we're really, what is the point of getting into the weeds on that? You know, is it going to be, it'd be really helpful for facial recognition, because if when I am doing the facial recognition test on Brain HQ, and 2 or 3 parts of the brain light up. And those are the parts of the brain that I already know I have a deficit or no deficit on my volumetric MRI. It would allow me to put these pieces together and say, no wonder I'm having trouble with this, or not having trouble with this. And then, okay, what are we going to do about that? And that is where the other pieces of our project have focused on. What do the Vibrant Neural Zoomer Plus tests tell me about what's going on in my brain? And what does the Cytokine panel 13 tell me about what's going on in my brain? So Bredesen made a big deal about not spending a lot of time on rebuilding the house until the fire is completely out. And so, and again, if we are embarked on a 20 or 30-year effort to make our brain stronger and to minimize the brain loss over that period of decades, how do I know that I'm there or not? How do I know what is still ongoing in terms of inflammation, and where is it? The Cytokine panel 13 is my latest addition to the highly sensitive CRP and the homocysteine levels to try to get a handle on that, because it is 13 markers rather than 2 markers, and a different 13 than the other 2. And I was looking for some answers for what to tell one of us when one of them is high and one of them is low. Or what do you do if both of them are low and the person is still losing ground? Or what do you do if both of them are high and that person feels fine? So it was not the be-all and end-all kind of test that I was looking for. And so I'm hoping that these cytokine 13 will be markers of inflammation that will shed more light on whether there is active inflammation going on. And the way I see us using that is that to use this panel of 13 tests that is quite easy to get from a routine lab, and a routine lab that appears to be covered by our insurances, that we can use this to precede an intervention that we are going to more intensely use. So if we are going to add a supplement or a group of supplements, it would be nice to have this measurement ahead of time that showed that I have 3 out of these 13 markers that are elevated, and then I take an array of supplements, take them away, add them, do something, and then I repeat the tests, and I either have more inflammation or less inflammation by this array of tests than I had before. So that would be a way to get a quicker validation that we are making a difference. So whether I'm using my vitamin D or my vitamin B12, do I really still have to take those things? If it'd be nice to be able to take it away And other than my vitamin D level going down, if it said my inflammation also went up on this marker, it would be nice to be able to have a measurement to say, gee, I guess that was doing more than I was giving it credit for. So it's not insignificant when we are reading references about this supplement or that supplement, and we regularly hear from all of us, how do I know that whether this supplement is better than that one, or which combination should be the best for me? I think the cytokine panel 13 may be beneficial. I only have 3 of them done so far, ordered and back. So I really only have a sample size of 3 so far to be able to see whether that is a useful enough baseline. You know, there are a couple more that have been drawn that haven't been that are not back yet.
Is that something you want us all to schedule?
The next time you have labs for some reason,
We should get you to
we
order
can,
that.
we get me to add that one to it.
Okay.
Now, one of the busy slides that I showed you either last month or the month before, where you had all of this alphabet soup of stuff around brain cells, were these things called cytokines. They were.
Get the slide?
Yeah, let's see if we can find it on the slide.
Go ahead and talk and I'll find it.
And it's sort of toward the end of the group. Maybe right about there. Yeah. Can you guys
You can see it up there.
can you guys see it on the slide? Maybe.
Blurry. Yep, I see it on the screen, so then.
Yeah, Patty, you've got to defog your background.
Oh, thank you.
Or share screen.
Share your screen.
Yep, that'd be even better.
Okay.
These cytokines are nerve cell messengers. They are what the body's nerve cells in our brain use to communicate between cells. And they can either be anti-inflammatory or pro-inflammatory. And these particular signalers can go from one cell to another by little droplets of perfume or something to tell one cell what the other one thinks of it or should be doing. So these particular cytokines have names like interleukin, and also things like interferon with certain numbers, interferon 1, 2, 3, 4, interleukin 5 to 20. There are a whole bunch of them that are signaling molecules, and some of them have been figured out to be more vigorous than others. So you can, and more likely to be found when there is some inflammation going on in the cells of the body. But there is also the lack of black and white that we would all like to see, because if I have a lot of action on one of these interleukins, and it can be pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. It could be a switch on or a switch off to turn different types of chemical reactions on. My point is not necessarily to confuse all of us all the time, but I think when we're dealing with something as complicated as the brain, there are lots of intended and unintended consequences that happen, just like when we say or do something, that there are lots of ways that phrase can be taken. There are lots of ways that the brain can use the input that it gets to do something about it. The fascinating part of the Vibrant Neural Zoomer Plus labs that many of you have had is that gives us 60 different proteins, and these proteins are the little antenna that are on the nerve cells of our brain. And depending upon how many antennae I have telling me to about a different protein, it can cause me to react differently. It gets a bit more complicated even than that when the backbone of the tail of a nerve cell has a long communication tail called an axon. It is the thing that goes along till it gets right near another nerve cell. And then for the last mile, the last micromillimeter, it communicates via a chemical signal, but it gets right to that synapse with a long axon. That axon is made up of its own little backbone called a tubulin molecule. So it has a tubule, a tube that acts as its skeleton to allow it to not be like a limp piece of spaghetti, that it can actually stay connected to that next nerve cell. These tubulin molecules have other signaling chemicals that allow it to do different things, to dispense different chemical signals. And those different chemical signals that it secretes vary depending upon what its job is in the brain. And most of these jobs were defined relatively simply at one point. When I was in med school and residency, these tubulin cells were felt to be backbone of these axons, and they were literally kind of an inert backbone, and that's what they did. They just were a supporting structure. Now there are articles like this one that a group of people did research on in 2022, and they say that this tubulin protein can regulate the growth of new nerve cells or the lack of growth of new nerve cells in Alzheimer's disease. So that these things are not just kind of passive parts of the skeleton of the axon coming out of a nerve, but they play a turn on or turn off role on whether I'm going to be able to build new nerve cells in that part of the brain or not, or whether I'm going to lose new nerve cells. So the functions are increasingly, whichever way you look, the function of these things that we're measuring are becoming more complicated year by year in what they do. So by becoming more complicated, that is good and bad. If it is complicated enough and does things that I want to influence more, then it becomes a part of the puzzle that I want to pay more attention to and find out which vitamin Ds or B12s or other types of things are going to affect this, because tubulin and this long axon is a part of what's called the white matter of our brain. They are a part of the ball of yarn that are all the interconnections between neurons. When I've told you guys that there are 100 billion neurons with 100 trillion connections between them, these 100 trillion connections in our head, when we do a volumetric MRI and we find that our white matter is in the 10th percentile or the 90th percentile, you have some inkling as to whether tubulin is part of my puzzle. So I should be able to say, well, white matter, that's not my problem. It's my gray matter. That's my problem. So I don't have to worry about tubulin for me, but I might have to for you, or vice versa. So the point of this long around the barn discussion or monologue,
Monologue.
is that as the knowledge of these things gets more sophisticated, the ability to use these different things to try to personalize the approach of treating this person of us or another person in our group becomes more likely, that rather than give everybody the same concoction of supplements, it could be that we can get to a point where we can say these people with these 3 interferons, or these people with these parts of their neural zoomer plus being abnormal, need a different concoction than somebody else.
Sure. I just had one other thought as you're talking about, we were talking about Brain HQ and what it can measure, and then the volumetric MRIs, and I'm wondering whether it would make sense to reach out to Dr. Mike Mercenich and his neurologists at Brain HQ and say to them, hey guys, we've got all these volumetric MRIs on people. Many of those people are doing Brain HQ. Would you guys be interested in helping us match up, what you're seeing? Because, I mean, in my case, for example, I didn't think I had a face recognition problem, but when I go to do it, it keeps giving me that one to work on. And I've noticed now that it is focusing on the sideways view of somebody. It shows me the sideways view, and then I have to match it up with the frontal view. And I do really well when it's, part of the face, but not when it's just the right side of the face or whatever. And it just keeps
Okay.
giving it to me over and over again. And I am eventually, I mean, if I keep doing it over and over and over again, I can see that I'm getting better. Which means I'm inferring that means that I'm building new connections between these brain cells or nerve
Memory
cells.
would be better.
Hmm?
Your memory could be working better.
Yeah, yeah.
You might be guessing better. too.
Right, I might be guessing better.
You might be just bad at it.
Right.
too.
Are memorizing what it is. That's what I do. I think that is the worst exercise ever. And I know I am not defective in recognizing people, as I have been educator of the year at 3 universities, different universities. And that would not go if I didn't know people. I remember their names, but when you only see a portion of a face,
Right.
and then they turn it, and I think it doesn't measure. I mean, it's your attention. What do we look at to memorize a face? You want their mouth, you want their eyes, I don't know. I think it's horrible, and I've given up. I don't even try anymore. Because
Well,
I
I
know
think-
I am not defective in that.
Jeannie, I think you
People in
would,
the-
Jeannie, I think you would acknowledge, though, that probably we all probably use somewhat different clues to recognize faces. That, oh, you're the one with no eyebrows, or you're the one with, the eyebrow that goes all the way across your forehead. I mean, there are different, there are different people in the sports world that make a big deal of those kinds of things,
I also noticed that.
I
they
I
are
just
Different nationalities.
Yes, they
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
and the
Right.
More
facial
diverse than
coloring,
Bouquet
but
Harbor.
then I just don't think the clues, the two match.
Sure.
And sometimes I'm good at it. And, sometimes I'm not going to do this, but I
Right.
don't want to fail. And I know they want you to fail to get better.
Yes.
But all of Bredeson's things measure attention.
Yeah.
The attentional
Yeah. I'm
nodule.
going to digress for a little bit, just because I just thought of something slightly different, and that has to do with again with our volumetric MRIs. One of the things that Lee Nisbet has agreed to try to help me on is that a few of you might have noticed when you've had your follow-up MRI that just in the last month, they have changed the format that they are sending me. So it is wreaking havoc with me.
Oh. Oh.
And because they used to be frontal lobe and then parietal lobe, and then you get to the occipital lobe, and you get to the temporal lobe. They've decided to flip that upside down and do it in a different order. And they also have left out some of the things that they used to put on the front page of the report, and they don't report on that anymore. So I reached out to the company and had a conference a couple of weeks ago with the people that designed this report, and they say, "Oh, well, don't worry too much. We've got all of the data that we used to have on new reports and old reports. We're just not reporting them in the same fashion. So if you want to send us some of the first report and the second report, we will reprocess them and put them in a format that will jive with what you had before."
But you don't know how they're thinking.
Yeah. So Lee's gonna help me with some of the logistics. Susan Stewart and Bill Dixon, before they left and went out to Ohio, they got both of their old and new reports. So we've got at least got a few, and I've got a few things to really I want to emphasize on 5 or 6 individuals where it seems like the variation from one test to the next is way too large to be correct. There's something that is off, and to have a critical part of what we're doing not be absolutely reliable is very disturbing to me.
Yeah.
And to me,
Yeah. So as I've been alluding to today, this whole project is complicated enough without a few of these other logistical challenges. One of the things that has been central to what I've shared the last couple of meetings has to do with how do you grow new brain cells? And this is where the growing the new brain cells, there is an article that I found recently that is probably 6 or 7 years old now, but I recently came across it, and growing a new brain cell is a very precise process that has very complex and multiple steps. And they like to define it, like all researchers do, in bunches of steps. And so this growth of the birth and maturation of a new nerve cell takes about 7 weeks, goes through about 7 or 8 different steps, and only takes place in one part of the hippocampus. And yet there are, as best as I can tell, by going through this article on these steps, there are a couple of specific markers that I have not yet been able to find whether you can test for them. But if you can't test for them yet, it probably won't be long before somebody has an ability to do that. But the idea that this might be the kind of information that we would want if we have some individuals in our group who have severe brain atrophy in important parts of their brain, then these are the folks that could benefit the most from this particular markers to say, are they still growing new brain cells? And also what this particular article did is it talked about the particular growth factors that were some of the more potent regulators of growing new brain cells. So there is an awful lot to be gleaned by some of these articles, and it is worth knowing whether the new baby neurons survived or not, and how can we figure that out. I think the guy from Brain HQ, Mike, is it
Mercenich.
Mercenich? I think he would be very receptive to this, when we have had people contact him that I've known. He's been very receptive to working with anybody in a variety of different ways. So I think that's something we should do. I wanted to tell you about a couple of other things that I think may be on the horizon for us. And did anybody hear anything on the news lately about the FDA approving the first gene therapy for sickle cell disease?
Yeah.
That is really a pretty fascinating milestone that might eventually bear fruit for what we're talking about with Alzheimer's disease. So I wanted to digress even more for a few minutes to try to tell you what that represented and why it might be important to us. Sickle cell is a rare disease primarily affecting Black individuals. But what it does is that the red blood cells in these people form a sickle shape. And as a sickle shape rather than a rounded shape, they don't get through little tiny blood vessels as easy as a round blood cell did. So they clog up blood vessels and cause these individuals to have severe pain and limited blood flow from not getting oxygen through to that part of the tissue. So the problem is that this sickling shape is because they lack a particular signaler that they need to reestablish that shape. So what this therapy is something that I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's called CRISPR technology, CRISPR. And it is a gene splicing technique. So what they're doing for these people with sickle cell anemia and sickle cell disease is they are taking some of their red blood cells and they are splicing out a busted part of the DNA or instructions for making this chemical, this enzyme that controls its shape, and they're putting in a new transplant piece of DNA into this, and then they are putting these new spliced, recreated stem cell pieces back into the person. Now, of course, this person has to also undergo a form of chemotherapy where they are also destroying all of the diseased sickle cells before they put in the new, better, improved version. So, what? Before.
Yeah.
So they end up with no red blood cells for a period.
For a relatively short period of time. And the studies that led the FDA to want to do this, that showed 93% success, was 29 out of 31 people. So these are really, really small studies to say, I'm going to raise my hand and volunteer for this particular activity.
What is the start?
And it is but if I've had a lot of attacks of where I've had many, I remember in training having people that had really horrific attacks of pain several times a year. So these were out of the blue stuff that would lead them to be hospitalized for several weeks, several times a year. So it was not a mild condition to address. But in any case, back to our neural Zoomer Plus, these particular proteins are oftentimes just slightly misshapen as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if you could get to a point of saying, well, on my neural Zoomer Plus, I have 3 or 4 abnormalities that I would like to correct. And so can I gene splice a better piece for something that I'm missing that will change this part of my nerve cell in my frontal lobe that is causing these cytokines to cause inflammation that causes these areas to be damaged. So I think there is a process by which this technology could, once you've gotten to the point that you've been able to do it successfully on on one area of medicine, I think within the next 3 to 5 years there will be a lot of other areas.
What happens to the 2 people that it didn't work for? Do they die, or do they just go back to the way they were before?
I didn't go and look.
More water?
They did not die, I don't believe, because even though the outcome measurement was how many attacks they had in the 2 years after they were transplanted, and 93% had no attacks in the 2 years afterwards. And the other, but they said, but no patients experienced graft failure or graft rejection, which I would think would be the catastrophic things that would lead to death or something horrible. So I think they still kept having attacks, but they didn't die. So there is one other condition. The CRISPR technology was talked about in the last 6 to 12 months, and that had to do with something called amyloidosis. I don't know if anybody heard anything of amyloid. Is the protein garbage that collects in the plaque in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease. But amyloidosis is a body-wide condition where that kind of clump of junk occurs in lots of body parts, like hearts and livers and kidneys and other solid organs. So it can create a real mess for the survival of those individuals. With this particular experiment that they were able to do, they were the people with amyloidosis have a lack of a processing chemical that without that particular chemical, they end up only building an imperfect molecule to do something with cell survival. And so these people ended up usually having major organ failure and dying in their 50s or 60s of after decades of decline. But the thing that was striking about the technology that they were able to do with these individuals is they took some of their blood cells and modified them. And in this era where we're worried about healthy eating with genetic modified anything, GMO chemicals, you know, the fact that we're taking real people and genetically modifying their very core DNA, you know, you can imagine the leap of faith that it would take to have to sign up for some of these things. But what they did with these people with amyloidosis, they took some of their blood, modified it, and put it back into them with kind of a homing device and said, go to where you're needed. And they were able to have these amyloid repaired molecules end up in liver, spleen, kidney, heart, wherever the problem was, without having to squirt it directly into that body part, but actually having it be able to find where it had to be.
Wow.
So
That
these
is
things
amazing.
sound like science fiction.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
But doesn't the body know about in general, is it done on just a few and they kind of either reproduce in some way to?
Yeah, I believe it is a Petri dish test tube kind of modification. So you take out some of the cells, mix them up in this little lab, and then give them back to the individual targeted for just that person. So the idea of it's gives whole new meaning to sort of invasive therapies, you know, as to what these particular things really are doing.
I think using a mechanism that the body already controls as to knowing what cells go to what part of the body.
Sure, it's kind of, I believe that most of these cells are what are called stem cells, so that they have in the development of us from an embryo, they are called pluripotential cells, meaning they have the ability, this stem cell has the ability with the right instructions to become a brain cell or a muscle cell or a
Wow.
heart cell or whatever.
That's amazing.
So they have, so they are the ability to develop in many, many different directions.
Wow.
Didn't I also hear that AI has been implicated in, helping them do all this stuff? That there's a component.
You should
of it.
repeat the question. So the question was, is artificial intelligence implicated in helping to do some of these tricky things?
I have had at least 2 or 3 people in our groups bring up AI in the last month or 2 about what is the role of artificial intelligence with Alzheimer's disease. And it seems as though that holds the potential, at the very least, for a companion robot to be able to talk to a Alzheimer's patient and not be frustrated with being asked the same thing 100 times. That at least if the ability to have a companion that never gets rattled, at some would be quite an interesting solution. But I don't know what your whether when you've got an infinite number of possibilities or a large number of possibilities, I think it really does make a difference to use artificial intelligence to handle oodles and oodles of variables.
Yeah.
So as a little bit of a holiday surprise, I had somebody sent me some information about a particular supplement called NeuroThrive. And it has 8 different ingredients in it in a once-a-day capsule. And 6 or 7 of them were things that I've heard lots of good things about. And a couple I didn't really know much about until this particular concoction was told to me. So I did a little research and decided to take a leap, and I ordered a 1-month supply for about a dozen people in our group to try it. And so I will be approaching some of you over the course of the first of the year. And this is truly this supplement is to grow new mitochondria, which are the energy factories for new brain cells. So I'm looking to do a very quick 1-month experiment of giving about a dozen people in our group a 1-month supply of this once-a-day supplement, and then doing a memory test the day you start it and a memory test 30 days later, and see if it makes any difference with those dozen people.
Will you spell that for us, please?
NEURO Thrive, THRIVE.
I spelled it right.
You get points for that.
UE.
So we've had one, Jeannie Hamron has been doing an experiment with me on one other supplement called Noopept, which is something that we got some got a supply of for a few months together. And the first month she wasn't so sure that it made any difference. And then the second and third months, the jury was still out, but she was a little more optimistic that maybe it was doing something. I haven't talked to you, Jeannie, about it in this last month or so. So you can shoot me down if I'm misrepresenting that.
No, and I think in the last week or two, the fog has really lifted.
Oh,
I have been doing it. I do the crosswords at 5 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
And I have started taking it really before I do the crosswords. And I'm now finishing them really fast, and I'm really happy. And then I started to do Brain HQ, and some of the things I'm really good at, or I've gotten better at, like split decision with the sheep and the Route 66.
Right.
And I wasn't always sure that the speed of measuring how quick and whether I had perceptive problems, and if the Route 66 was down in this corner, I had a longer time to, I'm too analytical, but anyway, made a difference in that.
So is that what she's taking, this neurodrive?
No,
No,
No, I'm taking, I would call it new op
can you spell it for us?
NOO,
the first, and then it's like spelling new op, and then it's OPT.
NOOP, I think it's EPT.
EPT, you're right.
NOOPEPT. And there's a whole field of supplements called nootropics, which is things that are kind of designer molecules to help the brain. And some of them, but they're this whole field, unless you are selling something as an FDA-approved drug, there is very little regulation on any of these things. They are sold as food supplements. So we have to be reasonably careful, in terms of whether there is any harm in them or not. So what I'm doing mostly is when I come across something that I've already been hearing about for a couple of years from different sources, I am more inclined to say maybe that one is a winner. So the thing that I was interested in with no OPEPT, or however we want to call it, Jeannie, was that it has a reasonably fast onset of action. You're supposed to take it, and then it is supposed to, if it's going to work for you, it's supposed to give you benefit in the 4 to 6 hours after you take it. It is that quick. Pardon me?
Do you know some of the components of?
It is this one particular chemical.
Oh.
And so it was a reasonably clean thing to try to be able to say this is going to do something or not. And then again, do I take one of them, 2 of them, 3 of them? What is the dose that one would use of this particular ingredient? So it was, since Jeannie is doing a whole lot of things that she does every day routinely, she was going to be a pretty good guinea pig to be able to say, does this make a difference for my set routine in how it turns out or not? So that kind of was the method to our madness.
But remember, if it works for me, maybe not somebody else with different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is
Diane Daniels was the one who said, when I talked to her about a month ago about it, and she said, if it doesn't work, don't give up on them, try another one. But I like this one. It's working.
So again, one thing that we've encountered over this last few years is that how much time do we have, to try to figure out differences that are occurring with all of us, and how and also what is the potential side effects. And if I can find enough data that says this might help and it doesn't look like it has any serious side effects, that's very, very different than doing CRISPR or doing some other anti-inflammatory injectable that might have a bigger time set of side effects.
So is that to say if we can't do crossword puzzles, taking this pill, we can then do crossword puzzles?
Maybe. That would be great.
Yeah. What's the old joke about I couldn't play the piano before I took this pill? Yeah. And now I still can't. Yeah. So in any case, I think the point of this whole endeavor, has I'm very fascinated by all of the new interests, and I think what we've succeeded in doing a bit has been able to integrate some very brave people who are joining this group and starting on this journey. And some of them are people that knew all about Bredesen on their own, and other individuals have know somebody in this group and wanted and got spread information about it through word of mouth. So I think we've got a lot that has happened in our group over the last few years, and I think the Bredesen movie is going to only accelerate that exposure and the interests, and it is going to require that we get even better at trying to identify the key features of what's working. And I think the thing that has made as much of a difference as anything has been the group dynamics that we have had over the last couple of years. That I think the extra Wednesday meetings, the emails back and forth, the record keeping discussions, the involvement of everybody in a variety of different ways has have been the ways in which I think we have excelled at some things that Bredesen and his colleagues haven't quite figured out yet either. I'd like to take the last 15 or 20 minutes for just any sort of feedback, any sort of Q&A, any sort of interest in loose ends or other things that you would wish any of you that we would do more of, do less of, or spend some more time finding some answers or explanation, do part of this.
Can we also, as you're taking turns talking, I'd also like to hear from anybody who thinks they've actually improved.
This year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, any anecdotal subjective reports would be great. So, a lot of you are muted, so you'll need to unmute in order to.
So Jeannie, we had you
in.
up first. You've already weighed in a little bit that you, but how was your long-awaited trip to Hawaii? How did that go?
It was excellent. The plane trips were horrible, as to be expected. And TSA took my cane, so I had to buy a new one in Hawaii.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Was that a weapon?
that's what they said.
Yeah.
I had anyway, I mean, nothing was going to bother me. It was wonderful. And
Wow.
I am exhausted. I did come home and I put the glug together, but I just said, no, I'm too tired to go. But I don't think there's many people down there anyway, and I'll drink it. So I had my little bit, and but it did the world of good. But I have recognized, well, I always knew people were very social beings, and I'm not sure the Bredesen protocol has enough for how connected we are. And I know coming from my culture, people are very connected to their medical care or their doctor, and they see them usually a minimum 6 times a year. But we don't have 15-minute appointments or anything like that. I mean, they're much, much more involved in everybody's life. And I think part of the success of our group is that Dr. Teel is involved with us. We have Patty as a liaison, and all of us, because I learn a lot when I listen to you people. And I'm really willing, I mean, to do the things I can do to help anyone, like driving somebody somewhere. I can do that. And take care of a dog or whatever you need.
Well, I
And
think there have been people that have done a little research about social connections and your impact on other parts of brain health. And it really is, I agree with you, it's not a piece that Bredesen puts enough emphasis on at all. You know, whether it be the social connections, whether it be the music and memory piece, whether it be volunteering, you know, I think all of those things are critical parts of a healthy brain. So, you know, so I think well stated. Thank you.
okay, you're welcome.
Yep.
You had said that you were going to, the results of the Neuro Zoomer Plus by, when I asked about getting feedback, you said that you were gonna do a group thing. And we weren't gonna do individual, you had group stuff that you were gonna give out.
I made a spreadsheet of
Nancy
every
was asking about how the results from the
Neural Zoomer Plus were going to be applied.
Yeah.
So there are two different ways that I have been doing that. One is I have been talking to individuals about their own Neural Zoomer Plus results. And I also did a spreadsheet on the whole 25 set of results and started looking at patterns. One of the things that it showed me that I think I mentioned is that the distinctions between the categories of the Neural Zoomer Plus, I think, are not as clearly defined as they should be. Or I think they're, let's say the other way around. I think they're too clearly defined and there's more overlap between the different tests, meaning that there was a group of proteins that were labeled as being markers of inflammation. And then there was a group that were labeled as being markers of immune dysfunction. And that difference seems quite arbitrary to me, because most of the way the immune system is going to work is through inflammation, and the way that most of the inflammation is going to work is through the immune system or through infections. So the distinctions seem quite arbitrary. And then when, for instance, one of the blood tests is on microtubule antibodies. And microtubules are the cells that make this tubulin that I was talking about. So I think that labeling it as only having to do with the loss of insulation, how do I want to summarize this? I think the way that I'm now looking at these is that the Neural Zoomer Plus panel of tests were done by various immunologists, and they were not necessarily looking at the world through the lens of Alzheimer's disease or cognitive impairment on every test that they did. But since that has been the focus that I've been interested in, I have looked for articles where any of the particular 60 proteins and their interaction with Alzheimer's disease is the research that I'm looking for across all of those 60 tests.
So you can basically throw out the categories they've clumped them in and just focus on
how they impact Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
And I think probably of those 60 tests, probably 45 of them or so have some impact on Alzheimer's disease. So I haven't had to throw out too many that were completely off our target.
So it sounds like you just need to reorganize the data so that it's helpful, as you're doing when you're looking at the patterns and then looking at the correlations between.
Yeah. So with the why don't we get some more questions? I've got something to share with you, and let me look for it while other people talk.
Yeah.
Because I can't talk and think at the same time, as you guys know.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. We've got, who else do we have on? We've got people in the room, and we've got newer people. So why don't we go with those of you who are still online? Patricia, maybe, do you have any questions or feedback or anything you'd like to raise at this juncture?
Let's see. Well, it's scary. We're supposed to be honest, so I'll be honest. I've not been able to get my, I've been reluctant to call you, Patty, and say, help, Patty. I can't get to my, get the little, I did the initial little tests, they're whatever they are, the Bredesen tests, they're whatever we're calling them. The BrainHQ. And that was great fun initially there and all, but then I haven't been able to be able to get them on my computer. So I've not been able to be doing it. So
okay, so I can help you with that. I'll
you all heard her say that. I didn't ask. She said it was okay. So
yeah, so I'll check and make sure that you're correctly registered, Patricia, and then I'll get
Patty, I don't want to throw it in your lap, but
that's okay. That's all right. That's what I'm here for.
Okay.
So,
Well,
I'll get back to you. It might not be tomorrow, but soon.
so
And, we'll see if we can get you straightened out.
okay. Oh boy, to do more of these hard tests. Yeah. My self-esteem is so okay.
Well, remember, the more you fail, the more likely you are to
Improve.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so flunking is kind of a good thing at the start
Yes,
because
that's the idea.
I like that goal there. Yeah.
We've been around.
And I will add another kind of interesting aside. When I went and did the MRI in Brunswick, I've done a zillion MRIs because of my multiple sclerosis, and so, my neurologist is always looking at the MS stuff there. Now, this was the first time in all those MRIs where my left leg wanted to kick up and keep kicking up the whole time, and my brain is going, I've been in enough MRIs to know you're supposed to just be still body. Why aren't you listening to this? But then I was thinking, well, no, they said it's just the brain. So left leg, do whatever you need to do, left leg. And sure enough, after that, the neurologist lady doing that, it goes, I thought I was doing something wrong because your left leg was moving. I said, nothing I could do about it. So I said, but my brain was still. So there. So that's an interesting.
That's good to know. Yeah.
It's an interesting Rubik's. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Well, Patricia, as she just mentioned, she did just have her volumetric MRI, and in spite of all of the other MRIs that she's had, I think this showed an awful lot of other things that we're looking forward to meeting with each other in the office to talk about those things. It's going to challenge me a little bit because again, you've had this MS for how many years?
Over a decade.
Yeah. And so the changes that are on her MRI, how much of them are related to MS, and just as importantly, how much does the MS impact the cognitive issues that she's concerned about versus other things related to aging?
Wow.
It's going to be a complicated discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
He said complicated. He didn't say grueling or he said complicated.
thank you. I hope it won't be.
So Russ, McKinnon, can you unmute yourself? Do you have any questions for us? You need to unmute. Do you know where the mute thing is? Dancy, maybe you can help find it.
Found it.
There we
Here we
go.
are.
Good. How are you guys doing? Do you have any questions?
Well, we're scheduled for the MRI on the 27th of December. And we're doing diet. We're doing pretty good with the diet.
Well, you should. You're an expert at that.
That's
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving was a challenge with food, but we got through it.
We don't overeat. We did not overeat.
No, it's not about overeating, honey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't over.
So we're
alcohol.
still, we're hanging in there. We've got the diet thing down, which is pretty good. And pretty much the 30 minutes, not every day, but I'd say 4 days or 5 days.
Yeah.
Ross exercises for 30 minutes at least.
I go the
Good.
line.
And yeah, I mean, the fasting is super easy.
Great. Good.
So
All right. Well, let us know if there's anything else we can do.
thank
How about you, Lynn? Do you have anything to add? You need to unmute. Yep, you're good.
Yeah, if you would buy one cookbook to learn how to do the keto, which one would it be?
Anybody have a suggestion?
No, I think the excuse me, I'm going to sneeze.
Bless you.
Sorry. I think my two favorites are the Brain Health Kitchen by Annie Fenn. And the other one is Brain Warriors Cookbook by Tanya and Daniel Amen, A-M-E-N.
Great.
Thank you.
Good Christmas presents. You tell your kids.
Brain Warriors Cookbook. Brain, B as brain with a B.
Brain Warriors Cookbook.
Warriors.
I find one of the problems with keto cookbooks is they use cream so much, and they're not supposed to be using cream, right?
Right, but you can substitute, coconut milk.
Excuse me?
When you have a recipe that calls for cream, you can substitute coconut milk.
What's wrong with that, Nancy? I don't like coconut. Oh, okay.
You don't really taste it.
Recipe, you don't taste
You
it.
probably,
Yeah,
you probably use almond milk.
yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you put me on the-
Yeah.
Any milk
Although
but
they-
Yeah.
milk.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, there's lots of them out there.
Okay, Tina, did you have anything you wanted to mention? And if so, yep, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I think that this has been really, really incredible. I was fascinated by the sickle cell and I love the idea when we say it's complicated, because life is complicated. There's so many variables, and I know the things that I could do a little bit more work, eating more. I don't, full disclosure here, I don't eat a full Bredesen diet. Mine is much more on the Mediterranean. And I'm a big fan of the Annie Fenn cookbook. And I know I follow a lot of a Cookie and Kate. She does cookbooks, and also anyone who uses anything on the internet. Many of her things can fit into a Bredesen protocol.
What was her name again?
It's Cookie and Kate. Cookie is the name of her dog, and her name is Kate.
Okay.
So she does a lot more vegetarian, and certainly any of the other for cream, when they said the almond milk, oat milk, they also have kind of a heavier almond kind of creamer, oat creamers. Those things, if you want a little bit more of a mouthfeel, can be very helpful.
Great,
That's
thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Thea, did you want to chime in?
No, I don't really think I have anything to contribute right now.
Okay,
That's
Thank
fine.
you.
Okay, so maybe we can turn to the folks in the room who has, Judy.
I've been doing this since September, and I'm not doing it completely. I've cut way back on sugar, way back on coffee. I do a half-hour exercise at least a day. But the main thing is the fasting. I think that's made a huge difference for me. Lost 11 pounds that I have not been able to move for the last 5 years. So just that alone has made me feel better. But the major thing is that I went to my eye doctor last week. I have a lot of eye problems. I've had 5, 6 eye surgeries, and she could not believe the difference in my vision.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I was telling my sister about it, and she said, Judy, do you know why? I said, no. And she said, they're talking about the keto diet, that it is doing incredible things for people's vision. So that alone is
fascinating.
really good. And I have glaucoma as well. I have a corneal transplant. My pressure is down, and I'm only down to 1 drop a day instead of like 6 drops a day. I believe that. It might be wonderful to get off the drops completely. But the other piece, I think a lot of it is the fasting more than anything else that has really changed. And so I'm doing 16, and have no problem doing it. And then the brain fog is just practically gone.
Well, I think
The
there's,
word, the word, pulling up words and slow brain has not changed at all so far.
Yeah.
one of the things that's interesting about is because of the Neural Zoomer Plus having a category of proteins that affect optic function, I ended up looking up a lot more about eye diseases and specifically macular degeneration than I had before. And it was partly stimulated by the fact that Bredesen makes a big deal in his First Survivors book that there are a lot of similarities between other degenerative neurologic conditions and Alzheimer's disease, and commented a lot that macular degeneration had a lot of the same biology as what's happening on the other side of the retina. The retina's on this side of the, the eyeball's on this side of the retina, and the brain is on the other side of the retina. So an awful lot of the biochemistry is quite similar. So I'm not particularly surprised that the Bredesen-like diet or healthy eating and overnight fasting and those things would have an impact on eyes. But it's great, but it's phenomenal to have it be confirmed. This is in like 6 months, right? Or 3?
It's less. I mean, actually, well, I was examined back in spring. And I started all of the protocol at the end of September, so it's September, not even September, October, November, December.
Yeah, 3 months or so.
Yeah. Cool.
That was
Very motivational.
if you guys didn't hear all of that online, Judy Milanowski was saying that she's been following this program not perfectly, but pretty darn well for the last 3 months. And her eye doctor was amazed at how much different her eyes looked and their tests now compared to last visit.
You know, I had kind of the same thing with my eyes, and I never gave any thought to this, but I've worn glasses since I was 10 years old, and every single year I've had to have a stronger prescription until last year was the first time that nothing changed.
Wow.
But, and also about 4 or 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with MD. And then the next year, when I went back, I didn't see the same person, and actually he was the one that owned the practice. A different person.
Oh my goodness.
Whose era that was, but yeah, I feel that I can't, like at night, I can't see that well to do work with numbers in particular. And right now, this is all kind of just a blur to me, move that still, but anyway, it was in the spring, I think, when I had my eyes examined last time, and no change with the tests. So.
Brain HQ.
Right.
Well, I can see the road.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I would be able to have an MRI. Is there any way that I could for the brain? You said I couldn't with the pacemaker.
Right, that is not my rule, that is their rule, but I found articles that have said that the pacemaker does not get interfered with by the magnets, but the magnet people at the MRI unit don't believe that report. So unless we can find an MRI center somewhere that has the ability to do the volumetric piece, there are a couple of people like you in our group who have not been able to get them because of their pacemakers, defibrillators, whatever. I've talked to the cardiology folks, and they say would be happy to see you right after your MRI to reset anything that got offset. So they are willing to facilitate a patient getting that after an MRI, but I haven't been able to budge the MRI people. They feel yeah.
They're worried about the liability.
They're worried about the liability of the thing.
Yeah.
So I still have not been able to, there is, I haven't done the follow-up work on, Dr. Daniel Amen is a psychiatrist and neurologist who has done more psychiatry than neurology, but he has done his patients have had thousands of SPECT imaging, which is a particular kind of CT scan rather than MRI. I think his closest facility for his is in New York State.
That's a ways.
That's a ways, yeah. But I think that that's as close as I've come to another modality other than a magnet to image the brain. And again, now that I've had the challenges with the logistics of the MRI reports being changed, I'm not sure how we would do with an entirely different modality like a CT scan.
Yeah. Well, we're now at 5, so we should probably wrap up. Go ahead, Judy.
I just wondering if anybody saw the article on AARP about the super agers, what they're doing, the study that they're doing with super agers. I was just looking it up again. They're studying people over 80, between 80 and 100, who have brains that are similar to people in their 20s and 30s. Wow. And it's a really in-depth article. It's really interesting. Wow. And the 10 things that they were saying that they said, well, of course, some of it, some of them are really brilliant people that just have had, incredible brains their entire life. But they said it's not all due to just the gene pool. And it gave like 10 different things that they should be doing, and they're very much in alignment with, what Bredesen has to say, about hearing and keeping your hearing and vision good, blood pressure. I mean, it was a little bit more specific, but teeth, yeah, but it's very similar.
How did they decide that they were super agers?
They just found people that were just really brilliant people. Basically, yeah.
What test did they use? Yeah.
But so what test did they give them or whatever? I think they probably had it in the article.
Maybe you can, I like the.
It's AARP.
In the latest little magazine. I really get.
Yeah, okay.
It wasn't the very latest one, the latest one, and some other stuff in it.
Well, Liz sent out a chat message before she left, wishing us all happy holidays. So I'll convey that to everyone who's online and
Here.
yeah. So thank you guys for hanging in there, and
We'll see you next month.
we'll see you next month, second Wednesday in January.
And
Bye, happy holidays.
Happy holidays, guys.
Everyone.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
All right.